and welcome back to Silicon Sounds, audio for the rest of us. Today I have the pleasure of reviewing this IEM, the QOA Gimlet, Queen of Audio Gimlet, an offshoot brand of Kinera, a very well-respected manufacturer of high-quality IEMs, earphones. Kinera has a number of offshoot companies, and the Queen of Audio being one of them. Sporting a single 10mm driver with an LCP diaphragm and housed in what you can obviously see is a very attractive shell. The visual and haptics here are all on point, but what does that mean about sound quality? Well, of course, it means very little. And really, we're going to take a look and a deep dive in how the Gimlet actually sounds. A couple notes. The Gimlet was very easy to drive. It is tip and source dependent. Out of the box, I popped them in my ears with the tips they came with that were installed already. These weren't really out of the box, by the way. These were a very generous loaner from some people on Facebook group. Really, thank you very much for that. And they sounded very bass prominent, overly much so in my opinion. When I took time to tip roll and paired it with a very neutral source, the Gimlet came alive. Very easy way to sway the balance is to spend time tip rolling, which basically means trying many different tips. It's always good for someone who's an enthusiast in this space, this portable audio and IEM space, to have a large number of different types of tips, at least a moderate number, to fit your ears, give you a good seal, and whatnot. So all of that being said, thankfully, Queen of Audio, QOA, have pulled off something really special here. And let's read on. So specs, 10mm LCP dynamic diaphragm driver. Impedance is 32 ohms, sensitivity is 108 decibels, frequency response 20 to 20 kilohertz, take that as what it is. Comes with a 4N 4-core OFC silver-plated copper cable with a 3.5mm termination. Equipment used for this review are the EIDA 9038 SG3 using the stock digital filter, the IFI hip DAC, and the Tempotec Sonata E44. Tips that are settled on were fairly wide bore tips that give a good insertion depth and seal. Those were the BGVP W07s. I believe the K-Bear 07s are the equivalent of those. Build, fit, and quality. What can I say? It's well made. Actually has, sorry about that, a good amount of weight to it. Beautiful looking with this nice metal insert. The looks are enhanced by this insert. Makes it look a little bit more expensive than it really is. Looking at the included accessories and cable, which I don't have, but I've seen them, they seem to be of the same quality level. Obviously, Kinera and by definition, Queen of Audio, who have their name stamped on this, earphone are very particular about the presentation as much as they are about the sound, and that's always a good sign, at least for the retail presentation. In the end, though, it is all about the sound. So let's get right into it. How do these sound? Bass. Here we go. The Queen of Audio Gimlet presents a low end that is sub-bass focused, but as I mentioned before, the bass can be made, in my opinion, too prominent at times, clouding the lower mid-range to a small degree, unless close attention is paid to the pairings, tips, and source. Wideboard tips, neutral source, that's what the Gimlet needs in order to really shine. The bass has a pleasing, smooth meatiness to it. Doesn't sound thin or tentative, while retaining a good portion of control, texture, and detail. Bass goes very deep. And while not bass head level in terms of regular playback, I never felt that the Gimlet lacked power in the low end at any time. Absolutely not. I use a couple tracks, both acoustic, and one was a house music track called Save Us Lord by Eno Soul. Has a very driving, steady, deep bass track that is unmistakable and constant. The QOA Gimlet really did well here, relaying the power of the low end while remaining well composed and smooth in playback. Remember that word, smooth. If there's any drawback to the Gimlet's bass, is that the bass definition could be a tad better. There was a slight lacking of detail. This can be heard on tracks such as Circumstance by Wayman Tisdale. There is a definite texture to his bass guitar, and a little bit of it was missing with the Gimlet. So the energy was definitely there, but when it comes to texture and detail retrieval in the bass, it's good, but it was felt a tad lacking in that regard. Mid-range. The mid-range of the QOA Gimlet is smooth, favoring macro over micro details. Although there are a surprising amount of micro details, but they're just not in as much abundance as the macro details. It's slightly recessed, but clear and expressive. It's actually reminiscent of the mids of the Tin Hi-Fi T3 Plus, while not sounding quite as open as that IEM. The mids have a warmth to the sound with good note weight. Transients are done well with believable attack and decay. If I were to nitpick, and I'm nitpicking here, but that's what I do as a reviewer, sometimes we have to nitpick. I'd say that the attack portion of the transients could be a touch sharper. Some of that smoothness takes away from the impact or the leading edge of the transients, but I'm nitpicking here. But the QOA Gimlet does retain a level of organic playback that is impressive regardless. Pick your poison. Organic to me is the most important thing with respect to playback, particularly in the mid-range. Layering is satisfactory, being bested by a few competitors in this price category, but still, individual elements are easy enough to pick out. Although this can suffer in busy tracks when the volume is turned up quite high, it suffers quite a bit. But this is not something that only the Gimlet has to deal with. Many IEMs in this category, price category, all the way up, have the same issue. At middling to moderately high volume levels, the Gimlet remained poised and the playback was smooth. Harshness is not an issue with the Gimlet at all, and its mid-range and lower treble does lend itself to longer listening sessions. There's not that aggressive pinna gain as we might have seen in, for example, if I have it here, the cadenza, which I'm going to compare it to. So for longer listening sessions, I would choose the Gimlet compared to that previous IEM. It really lends itself to long listening sessions without fatigue. What was notable again was the smooth presentation, while still retaining enough detail to keep things interesting. If it's too smooth, over time, depending on what you consider important with respect to playback, I like detail. And something that is too smooth, it's difficult for me to listen to for a long period of time and get engaged to the music, connected to the music. I always feel like I'm missing something. Although it's not milk and honey, and when directly compared the Gimlet to a few cherry-pick earphones such as the Gummy Ho, Celeste, another house brand, and the Cadenza, for example, the mid-range offered by the Gimlet does come off as slightly more veiled. That could be due to the smoothness, and I don't want you to think that it's veiled in that it's completely barren of detail or emotion. It is. But when you cherry pick and you go directly to the two, compared to the two, you do find that a little bit. Timbre is actually, though, very good and adds measurably to the musicality that the Gimlet is capable of conveying. Treble. Treble is reasonably extended and detailed with an acceptable amount of air and sparkle. The treble inherits the smoothness of the mid-range and makes for an easy listening experience. It's not going to harm or fatigue you. Definition here is good, but not class leading. This is a presentation that will not offend, yet for the most part does not sound lacking at all. If anything, and I'm nitpicking here, once again, that's my job, I would have liked just a little bit more air and sparkle, but I'm pleased with the treble of the QOA Queen of Audio Gimlet. Imaging and soundstage. The QOA Gimlet presents a moderate-sized soundstage with reasonable width and lesser but still identifiable dimensions of depth and height. It's believable dimensions. It's not vast in one area and then flat in the other and makes it sound unnatural. Not at all. Soundstage here is heard as more intimate, with imaging and instrument placement being solid within those intimate confines. So, well done. Let's talk about verses. I don't have the Tin Hi-Fi T3 Plus here, but I'm going to compare it to the Tin Hi-Fi T3 Plus. The Gimlet has more prominent bass, with bass quality being very similar actually between the two. Where the T3 Plus pulls ahead is in soundstage and layering, sounding more open. There are more similarities here than differences, by the way. Though throughout the rest of the frequency range, there are definite similarities between the two. Both are quite musical with an organic presentation that really pleases the ears. So to pick one over the other, it's difficult. The soundstage, the openness of the T3 Plus, yes, superior, but the note weight, the bass power and impact on the Gimlet, superior. So choose your poison once again. Wan Tangzu Wan Let me pop them in here. This is the flavor of the month for a lot of people, and for good reason. But let's get to the comparison part. The Gimlet has better note weight and sounds fuller, in particular at the frequency extremes. The Gimlet is also pickier of tips. It's more tip sensitive, and sources with the Wanner being much more accommodating in that regard. Still, if I was to pick one, it would definitely be the Gimlet. After finding the synergy with source and tips, the Gimlet just outperforms the Wanner, mind you, at a significantly higher cost. Well, significant, maybe double the cost. The Wanner is a very, very smooth performer, but for someone like myself, and I'm probably going to do a review on these as well, who loves detail, the Wanner just falls a little bit short. It's very easy to listen to, extremely easy to listen to, very unobtrusive, great if you just want to relax. But if you really want to have time to connect to the music and be more emotionally involved, the Gimlet's probably the better choice. Celeste Gummyho, another stablemate of the Gimlet. If I'm not mistaken, and you can tell me if I'm mistaken down in the comments, both Kinera house brands. The Gummyho is an interesting beast, as it did take much longer, significantly longer, in use and burn-in time to really settle down and show what it's capable of. Out of the box, the bass sounded thick, too thick, syrupy actually. It sounded slightly artificial throughout the frequency range. And over time, in particular burn-in, people say 80 hours or more. Whether you believe in burn-in or not, a lot of people are saying the same thing about the Gummyho, in that it does require a little bit of time, more than usual, to really sound its best. But let's get down to how do they sound comparatively speaking. Well, the Gummyho is even more balanced than the Gimlet, with higher levels of detail retrieval and superior overall definition. That'll tell you where we're going here. The Gimlet, on the other hand, has a more prominent lower register, with the Gummyho eking out that audibly superior texture and detail retrieval in the bass that the Gimlet is heard to lack when you do a direct comparison. That being said, both are very good earphones when it comes to musicality. I must say that if I had to choose one, I would choose the Gummyho. But find both products are very well executed. Again, it depends what your musical preferences are. I like detail and musicality. That's what I like. Detail, musicality, I'd have to go. Musicality on both of these is quite good, but the Gummyho is just more detailed, more expressive in that regard, and I would have to choose the Gummyho. Another flavor of the month, and I don't say that in a bad way, is the Kiwi Airs Cadenza. How does that compare to the Gimlet? Well, smooth versus more aggressive. Let's just put it like that. The Both of them have reached very low, very deep, although the Gimlet's bass has a thicker, more driving bass. The cadenza, sometimes the bass sounds almost too dry, too abrupt, although it does go deep and is quite expressive. Transients on the cadenza definitely superior than the Gumiho. The attack, the decay are just that much sharper. Mid-range is where things get a little bit interesting. The Gumiho, sorry if I called it the Gumiho, the QOA Gimlet, and please forgive me for that mistake. The Gimlet in the mid-range has a much smoother mid-range. While arguably the cadenza may pull more micro details, it's aggressive. It can be aggressive. It has a fairly aggressive pinagain, which can get on your nerves sometimes depending on the genre. In particular, if something is recorded poorly, the cadenza can be problematic to at least my ears. It's bright, it's open, it's clean, but the Gimlet is more controlled, smoother, and less apt to be harsh than the cadenza. They're very differently tuned. This is not apples and apples. This is definitely apples and oranges. Different completely. If you want a more aggressive, brighter tuning, go for the cadenza. If you want a smoother, in my opinion, even more musical tuning, you go for the Gimlet. If I had to choose between the two, after finding the great synergy between both of them, and both of them require tip rolling and searching for the proper synergy, I would probably choose the Gimlet. So there you have it. So conclusion. The QOA Gimlet is a very pleasing and well-tuned IEM. It offers a sound that won't offend but isn't reserved, and it's not boring at all. Quite the opposite, actually. Smooth musicality is what's on tap here, and when we step back and don't just isolate bass, mids, and treble, which a lot of people do, and maybe it's the fault of a reviewer or myself, an opinionated music lover, where we separated in that to give a more fine, detailed description. At the end of it, when you put it in your ears, it's all about how it all congeals together. So when we step back and don't just isolate bass, mid-range, and treble as individual elements, the Gimlet really shines in how complete it really is. It's a good buy and gets a recommendation from Silicon Sounds. Want to thank you very much for watching the video. Sorry for any errors that might have been there, but you get the gist of it. This is a good set. Definitely a good set. And none of these that I compared it to are bad sets. Through all of them, I'd probably still go with the Gumiho, but that's just my decision making. The Gimlet is definitely, if you're looking at it, and if you want that kind of meaty, more thick, well-rounded sound that has a smoothness to it that lends itself to long listening sessions, the Gimlet might be something for you. Want to thank you again for joining us at Silicon Sounds. Check out our blog on the internet as well, siliconsounds.com. And we also have a presence on Instagram. Take care and see you in the next video.